Hey everybody, welcome back to the Autopilot On Podcast. I'm just going to start calling it the greatest aviation podcast in the world. We got John with me today. We finally got John out of the bathroom into a normal
Look
room
at
in his
this.
house. Woo!
A blank wall.
And Connor's back. Welcome back, Connor, friend of the pod.
Hello, fellow aviators.
We got a few things on the docket for you guys today. We're going to be talking about Spirit is making a change in their platform finally. It sounds like they're trying to go premium like they've been talking about. They also decided they're going to delay some SEC filings. We're going to talk on that. Starlink is getting popular in commercial aviation, so we got some talking on that. And single pilot ops, I know it's been a hot topic. Want to talk about that. And then the big issue we're going to talk about after all those is the ATC issues going on with the system and the controllers. So you guys ready to get started?
Let's do it, man.
Let's do it. All right. Well, John, I know you're a little more deep on the filings and things. So why don't you lead us off with the Spirit stuff?
Yeah, so what I've kind of gathered from the last month or so is after Spirit went public, they relisted their stock. They didn't do an IPO offering. So they just simply relisted. And the way I see how that went, and that's, Scott, I think you sent me an article too about how basically what the reason for the relisting is to make the creditors and debt holders kind of whole and an easy exit out of their position in Spirit. So they were be able to be made whole in this way versus going through a bankruptcy and trying to fight and claw for that money in that process. So I think that's kind of where they have to go public in terms of, since they are a publicly traded company at this point, they have to be able to release those documents to the SEC.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe that they do not have to do an earnings call. That's discretionary based upon if the company wants to or not. That's my understanding. I could be wrong on that. So double check me on that.
Yeah, well,
anyways, they filed a document that basically allows them a 15-day extension of when that period was due. And again, the way I understand it was after they go public, they have 45 days of the first quarter ending to be able to release those documents of how they performed. They got an extension for 15 days on top of that. So it is going to be due now in the May 30th at the end of this month.
Okay.
So, we've talked a lot about this. It's an interesting subject just for me because, we see all the inner workings kind of came out this January, and all the emails and everything that we speculated. And, Scott, I've talked to you since last August about this. And, it's always when there's silence, there's probably something going on. And there's a whole lot of silence right now.
Yeah.
Barry Biffle on the first quarter in his call with Frontier, he was specifically asked about this. An analyst asked him, said, "Hey, Barry, you guys have had one or two good quarters in the last couple of years. Everything else has been way underperforming. Is there a material change in your business model that you have to do? Or that is there M&A required to be able to right-size your company?" Went on to basically say, we're 19 cents increase in RASM, revenue per available seat mile, and all that kind of crap. And said, we're doing great. It just, the tariffs, all that happened. There's always a reason, though, with the company to have issues. And so Barry left the conversation there. Analysts came back and said, "You do not want to comment on M&A?" And Barry simply said no, and they moved on. And I don't know, maybe it was just me interpreting the way he said it or not. It was just like, hey, we have things going on, but I'm obviously not going to say anything to you. So I thought that was interesting with all those things going on. So I think by the end of May 30th, we'll have a really good understanding of where Spirit lies. And I think there's going to be a lot of articles that come out because they were burning about $90 million a month. After the bankruptcy, they had about $900 million in cash. So that was last November they had that coming out of bankruptcy or going into bankruptcy. I don't know what they had, 750, and they got up to 900 million.
Mm-hmm.
Between when did they exit bankruptcy? March?
Something like that.
So between March and the end of May, we'll have a good understanding of, okay, how much cash have they actually burned and have they been able to decrease in the cash burn? They did decrease about 25% of their summer schedule and available seat miles. So they're preserving the cash that way, meaning that they're just not going to go after the they're kind of pulling a Frontier in that sense of they're cutting down to the bone. If there's nothing that's going to be profitable, they're not going to fly it. So I think
Should
that's
have been
kind of
doing that
telling.
for a while, man.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing about between Frontier and Spirit is Frontier is very quick with how they operate versus Spirit, which took a while for them to implement the changes. Frontier will cut like a third of the schedule off a week within a 2-3 week notice or whatever.
Right.
And so it'll be interesting to see how that turns out. Again, I still hold my prediction by probably end of July, but I might extend to end of summer, but we'll see something come down the pipe.
And
so that's kind of what's going on.
And you really have to give credit to Spirit with their new CEO. He's coming in and he's making some changes, right?
Yeah, he's doing something at least.
One of the two that comes to mind is the increased legroom, trying to go for a more premium aircraft. It looked like the first 40 seats were going to have increased legroom and wider seats. Everybody was always complaining about just how uncomfortable that it was. It's almost like sitting on a dugout bench, like sitting on hardwood for long periods of time. And the other one, I don't know if y'all saw it, but they had a partnership with Contour Airlines.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
That's so weird.
And I thought it was strange too, and I did some reading into it. It looks like Contour, they have a fleet of between 20 and 30 aircraft, Embraer 145.
145, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they service the towns with low population. Mm-hmm. What it looks like they're doing is partnering with Contour to bring them to like the big hubs. So say it's Alexandria, Louisiana to Dallas, Fort Worth. Well, now Contour will take you from Alexandria to Dallas, Fort Worth, and then you get on a Spirit jet and go to your final destination. So I got to give props to them because they're trying, and I agree with you as well. Silence means something's moving, but it was good to see those two come out in the past few weeks. So credit to them.
One thing to add on top of that, the article I looked at for the extra legroom, there was someone who went and actually did an interview and looked at all these things. They are the customer service side of things. They're trying to match what Southwest is in terms of the product. So what they thought of was the customer base was actually 50-50 split on if they liked the blocked middle seat versus extra legroom. But what they're doing now is able to take, instead of like 3 rows of blocked middle seats, what is that? So 8 times 3, so 24 seats instead of like 24, whatever it is. Now they're able to extend that to 40 seats.
Yeah,
and there's enough of a market. There's enough of a market for them to be able to sell those. And they might look at their load factors and all those different kind of metrics to see if that actually is a good, smart business decision. So I think it'll be interesting to see what Frontier does in that sense of now, if they're going to model it the same way, once they get the big front seats or the first class, are they going to get rid of the block middle and switch over to just extra legroom seats instead of that?
Well, Frontier already announced they're doing that.
They're taking away the block middle seat?
Yeah. They put out a big press release when they picked their seats. This was in the last month. I think we talked about it. Anyways, I'll post the pictures in the link. They are, in the article, I believe it said by midsummer they were going to try to convert the whole fleet to basically match Spirit's current. Like, I think Spirit has like 3 rows of the big front seats, and basically Frontier's just matching their aircraft. Which
I'm saying the one behind it though, the blocked middle seat, because what Spirit did was that they have the first class seat and then
they were blocking further middle seats.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought we were just talking because Frontier was doing that. Now they're transitioning to the big seats. Spirit was blocking further rows. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I don't mean to sound like
that never made a lot of sense to me because, you might pay 20, 30, 40, 50 bucks extra for that blocked middle seat, but passengers is what's paying these bills. You need to have these aircraft full as possible. It's 50 bucks to not sit next to somebody, great, but as an airline perspective, you got to get butts in the seat.
Well, and the yields are going to be better on that too. That's my perspective.
I think the argument to why the block middle seat makes more sense if they can sell them is because basically you're having the passenger pay for both seats, and they're not carrying the weight because now they're burning less fuel. They have more baggage space available, and the seat's still getting covered. and they don't have to deal with checking the passenger in, carrying the
I'll
extra
buy that.
load, all that.
Can I put?
Go ahead.
So what I'm thinking is, could they charge the same amount as a block middle seat as an extra legroom, but instead of and being able to get that capacity back by the middle seat as well?
Oh, so you're thinking like Comfort Plus versus just like, well, while you were talking about that, I was thinking, I'm like, well, if you look at all the legacies, right, and the regionals flying the legacies, you usually have like 5 to 7 rows of first class seating. So the market's there for that many rows because those seats are never empty unless somebody misses their flight or
With
whatever.
loyalty rewards and
Right,
all those different
right,
types of
right,
things.
right. And so, I know people like to poo-poo on the ULCC loyalty stuff, but, I've heard recently on a personal level from people who have, who are loyalty members of both Spirit and Frontier's programs, and they're
It's
like,
the
man,
best.
they love it. They're like, oh, I'm gold or platinum, whatever those two airlines call their programs, and they're like, it's awesome. I don't have to pay the baggage fees anymore. Like, I don't do any of that stuff. I just show up, and I feel like while everybody else is complaining about their problems and complaining about the fees, if you're part of the loyalty program just from getting their credit card or whatever, you don't have any of those problems. It's like being a Delta or United customer all the time, right? I think this is where those two airlines should have put a lot more effort into their loyalty programs because it does solve a lot of their customer service issues. The problem is because they're marketing to the infrequent low cost flyer, those people aren't as frequent flyers, right? So it's kind of double-edged sword where it's going to be harder to get their loyalty because they're only flying once a year, maybe,
It is
if that
interesting,
makes sense.
with Frontier and Spirit, they are flying major city to major city. There's always people
They
that
are.
have to go from Philly to Fort Lauderdale. There's always people that have
Sure.
to go from Las Vegas to Dallas.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there is still people that need to go to these cities. And now what American, United, and Delta is doing with their credit cards, they make so much money through their credit cards now. They're almost like a bank that they've been able to block out a portion of their aircraft to sell those seats for the same price that Spirit's was doing. So that's where the big problem is now you can fly for $30 more on American from city to city versus saving your money and going and flying Spirit or Frontier. That's the way I look at it. It
And
might be dumb.
I think that's the entire reason why there needs to be consolidation between the two companies.
Mm.
Because as that happened over the last 5 years, being able to do that and the turning into banks, from better or worse, they lost their competitive edge, and now they're competing against each other for $30 tickets. I went back and re-listened to the merger announcement back in 2022, or their call that they did, and one of the biggest things that they saw an opportunity with was being able to combine both the companies in creating a way larger route map and basically for loyalty. And if you listen to how Barry is talking about it to investors in the last couple earnings calls and investor updates that they do every couple months, basically he's saying that we have like 0.1% of what United makes on their credit cards. He's like, if we could get to 0.5%, like literally just like half a percentile more, it's millions of dollars extra. And he's like, if we can go in that direction, we're going to win in that sense, because now you have the scale. You're not competing against anyone else for $30 tickets. You can better price match, and you have better reliability in that sense. And your, value proposition to a passenger is way better at that point. And then another thing he told everyone was, hey, we're looking at international partnerships, and that has to be something in our footprint long term.
Yeah.
And so he's like, we're so consumed right now with getting our loyalty program where it needs to be that we have yet to make any announcements on different partners around the world that we want to go with. And so I think you're going to start to see that change. It just like how all these other legacies had issues before they consolidated. It's the same type of thing. And I think that there is enough market share for a combined company. And there's $1 billion of cost savings, they're saying. And I think there's a way better advantage going forward. They just need to be able to right size the ship. So I think we'll see something like that come down the pipe. That's why I believe so firmly in it.
Well, I mean, we talked about this previously, John, but like, I think the number. Like, what's the percentage of profits the airline, those legacies are all making on their credit cards? It's
It was like
substantial, right?
it's like $1 billion a quarter, and so they're about
Quarter.
$4 billion in revenue per year, I believe. I could be wrong. To the listeners, I am off at 2 hours of sleep again, so just letting you know. Anyways, though they're able to offset all of those basic economy tickets based upon that $4 billion.
Isn't it like at
They,
least 30% of their income is from credit cards?
yeah,
It's
it's an
substantial.
immense.
Yeah.
Their entire business hinges on their ability to have these deals.
Yeah.
So they were not like this in 2015, and that's why the margins were flipped, with the low-cost carriers having 20% margins and the legacies like Delta having like 5%, and that was a good quarter for them. Their chasm as well is something that people don't realize. Frontier, it's literally, I think, 6 cents per seat mile. Delta's 18. It is literally 3 times more expensive to operate an A321neo than it is at Frontier. So, like, if you have those kinds of cost savings with your employees, with the airframes, with everything, boiled down, how much do you really need to be charging to be able to start making some serious money? If you have the consolidation where you're not competing against those $30 tickets between the two companies, maybe it's $75 ticket, or maybe it's $60,
which is still great.
Economies of scale is insane. These are multi-billion-dollar companies. So I know it's Frontier. I can't remember, it's billions of dollars, but like, you average that out across an entire year, and even if you get $5 more per seat, that's hundreds of millions of dollars probably. So that's kind of my perspective with it.
Makes great sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, let's keep it moving. Let's move on to Starlink. I know, Connor, you wanted to talk about that. So why don't you get us started on what's going on with Starlink in the industry?
Yeah, I mean, Starlink sparked my interest whenever I saw the 13 satellites flying across me at 35,000 feet a year ago. I thought it was a UFO. I said, "What is that?" And so
last night to me, I
Did you
saw
see
an
his
entire
train?
thing. Yeah, dude, we were so tweaked out because it was like 4 a.m, and we just see literally 20 Starlinks. It looked like aliens were coming to invade us, like you said.
yeah, I mean, it was crazy. So, I mean, that just really caught my interest. So I started doing a little bit of research on it. And United Airlines is the big player in Starlink right now in the aviation side of things. United plans to install Starlink Wi-Fi on 40 planes per month and complete the fleet of more than 300 regional jets by the end of this year. So everybody's going to be able to have Wi-Fi on the aircraft. No more airplane mode. I thought that was fascinating. They're planning on Starlink, and Elon Musk are planning on having 10,000 aircraft configured for Starlink by 2034. So we're talking,
That's crazy.
10 years from now. And I was thinking to myself, we all started somewhere where we didn't all start flying big jets, right? So we were always in 172s and 421s, and we always had the Stratus device, and that had ADS-B in and ADS-B out. But now you can just link up your iPad or personal device to Starlink, and you'll be able to have traffic. You'll be able to have current weather, current forecast for the airplane of intended landing. So, I mean, to me, it's just fascinating. And they also use it for many other reasons. I remember whenever the hurricanes came and hit North and South Carolina, Elon Musk, they had no Wi-Fi. It just decimated the entire that side of the state, and they were able to park those Starlink satellites right over the top of those affected cities, and boom, immediate Wi-Fi, immediate connection to the outside world. With it now crossing into aviation the way it is, I thought it was important to at least mention, because now you're going to start seeing Starlink options on your commercial flights.
Do you think that affects us as pilots in terms of like capabilities of onboard weather at this point? Like, what kind of tools do you think high-speed internet like that creates for us?
Right,
in the sky?
That's what I mentioned. Now you're going to have current weather, you're going to have traffic, and whenever you get up to 10,000 feet, you lose service on your personal device. Now you can link up your personal device to Starlink, and you have to-date weather, to the minute, to the second weather. You can see it changing. You can put on the radar and see where it's which way it's trending. I mean, it is a fantastic tool that I think is going to really contribute a lot to safety and also convenience for passengers.
Well, and that's a big point because it's, right now you look at these big domes on the top of these airplanes. I've always wondered how much they weigh, the Wi-Fi, the internet receiver domes.
Hundreds of pounds, right?
Yeah, right? That's pounds, money. Starlink, I don't know if they have to put some kind of dome on top to receive it, or they just can directly get it from the satellites in the airplane, from your phone.
So my friend, he flies a 421, and it's like a little Stratus device, about a
Okay.
6x2 inch device that he just puts on his on the windscreen, and he hooks up directly to it. Now, I'm not saying that's how it's going to be for the regional jets,
Right,
but it's
right.
very similar. It's very similar. They have a plan that's similar to Stratus. For those who don't know what a Stratus is, it's a Wi-Fi compatible device that you can link up your iPad or your cell phone to, and it's aviation related. And you can get traffic and real-time weather through Stratus, even though you don't have a cell phone signal.
Brock is saying that they weigh approximately 110 to 330 pounds for an Airbus 320 series for the domes.
I mean, that's a ton of weight for them to save, because they're all about saving weight. Yeah, if you can eliminate
Think
the
about
dome.
how many people would buy an airline ticket on your airline
Tons.
to have free Wi-Fi.
This is where United was freaking genius in being the first one to the game on it.
United is the first one to the
Yeah.
ball.
Dude, I've been very impressed with United's moves this year in the past couple of years.
Totally.
They are really making the right moves to become the next industry leader. And mark my words, man, they're gonna overtake Delta as number one real soon. Kirby has been on it. Like he's thinking ahead.
Can I just say something really quick about
No.
what one thing that I think a lot of us forget about is that the people that buy first class seats, or even anyone in economy, even on United, imagine going from San Francisco to Newark on if you didn't have Wi-Fi. That's about 5.5 hours of lost productivity for someone in business versus them being able to have full Wi-Fi, lightning speeds, being able to do whatever they need, listen in on calls. Maybe they have to be muted, but they could actually be attending meetings and actually continue working. That's thousands of dollars of cost savings for an actual company for that as well. So I think when it comes to, entertainment wise, it's great because you can watch 4K everything at that point, but the actual business standpoint is there too. Did you guys see the Polaris updates that they're doing that just got released? Polaris is United's first class seating.
Oh.
So they just released a new first class that's going to be coming out on specific international routes. And it's like basically an entire, I don't know how they call it, like a little apartment basically. So it's pretty cool. So they're making, like you said, Scott, like they are not stopping. They are continuing to make really big improvements in every facet of their business. So
and
they're
I
going to continue to win.
It was interesting that United is trying this out with their regional first, because at the end of the day, before you roll it on to your flagship carrier, which is United, it has to be perfect. So, I mean, these guys are genius by rolling it into the regional jets first for almost a trial.
Brilliant. Yeah. And because it's so lightweight, probably comparatively, that's the number one thing. Like I commute on Delta a lot, and if I get on the SkyWest plane or something, they don't have the free Wi-Fi. Or even the older Delta jets that are still in the fleet, they don't have. Well, I think Delta might have eliminated that, but probably not. But yeah, if I can get on a regional jet and get my free Wi-Fi, if I'm doing some work for the podcast or whatever when I'm commuting, it's so nice. It's a game changer.
Yeah.
It makes you rather want to be on their airplane.
Do you want to show this real quick, Scott? This article, just showing the images. It's pretty cool.
And I'm not saying that Starlink is cheap. I mean, you can go onto the internet right now, and instead of having home Wi-Fi, you can have Starlink at your house. It's a little bit more expensive than the typical $69.99 or $79.99.
Not much though, dude.
Because $130.
Yeah, it's 100 to 130, but the speed's actually a lot faster than most home internet speeds, and it's pretty incredible. I have a bunch of friends that live in rural areas, and they have.
Keep going down; it'll be down there.
Is it further down? Okay.
Yeah.
But my friends, okay, yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's
pretty
nice, man.
That.
Nice little pod in there. You get your feet down in the bottom here, and it probably ends up lay flat.
Yeah, totally. And then go down a little bit farther, and you can see what the two configuration looks like.
Oh, there you go. Oh, it's got a slider in the middle. Yeah, that's like That's like something you would see on, Emirates or some foreign carrier.
27-inch 4K
100
screens.
right there.
Look at that, man. I know that American too was going to start doing pod seating with our suite, quote unquote suites.
Yeah.
Wow, look at that. That's pretty nice.
I'm going to give y'all an over-under on how much that seat cost.
What, to produce or to buy?
Or to like, you mean like as a passenger to sit in that seat?
If you were to buy that ticket with the club seating, do you think it's over or under $3,000?
Over 100%.
Oh, yeah. So like I know
it's probably 7,000.
Yeah, I know on Emirates it's about 10. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And people are obviously buying them if they're going to put them in the jets. I mean,
they are. Yeah, that's where they make all their money. Like on like a 380 or something, let's say 10 people buy that seat, that pays for the whole flight, I think. Like, yeah.
I know first class is it pays for about 30% of United's cabin.
Wow.
So 30% of all the revenue taken is in the first 10 seats.
Yeah. Substantial.
Which is insane.
Yeah.
So the money's there. Everyone's investing in it. They see it is going to continue to happen. And like we said, Scott, the macroeconomics that have changed, the rich got very rich and the middle class shrunk significantly. So the money is there for the ultra wealthy to go and buy those seats and for you to sign up for their credit cards, for you to be able to redeem your points on one of those. That is their value proposition, which is a damn good one.
Mm-hmm.
So
let's keep it moving. Airbus single pilot ops. Who wants to take that one to go?
Yeah, I mean, this is mainly going on. Airbus is obviously made in France, so this is a Europe thing. But I did a little bit of research on this as well, and it looks like they're retrofitting or they're starting testing on Airbus 350. And the whole idea on this single pilot ops is, number one, probably financial for the airline. And I started digging into it a little bit deeper. Instead, if there's a certain flight time where airlines are required to bring more than 2 pilots, and I can't remember if it's 9 or 10 or 11 hours. Somebody would have to fact check me on that. But there's on these big transatlantic, these big aircraft routes, they're having to pay for 4 pilots because of crew rest issues. Now they're saying that they can only bring 2 pilots, and during the critical phase of flight, such as takeoff, landing, adverse weather, there'll be 2 pilots in the aircraft. But during cruise, where you're just sitting straight and level for hours at a time, they're actually retrofitting these aircraft so only 1 pilot is in the cockpit, even to the point where they're installing a restroom in the cockpit. So there's always somebody up there. And this is taking on a lot of traction. You can go online and all the airline pilot associations have something to say about this because they're trying to protect our jobs. And I think it is important to mention there's one union contract that requires 2 pilots on board at all times, and that's
Delta. Yep.
So Delta is a little bit ahead of the game. They might have seen this coming, and the pilots are smart enough now to say, there it is right there.
Yeah, it's an AI rendering, but this is the one that was floating around, right?
Yeah.
Hey,
yeah,
I would
exactly.
love to have a bathroom in my cockpit.
And so
it's so much easier.
And and what really sparked my interest on this again is Lufthansa. They just published an incident. It happened in 2024, and they published it. The investigation finished a couple weeks ago, where they had a captain that left to go to the restroom outside of the cockpit. Well, the first officer, who was the only one in the cockpit at the time, became incapacitated. Nobody knows if it was food poisoning. Nobody knows exactly what it is. They're pretty tight-lipped on it. But the captain was locked out of the cockpit for 8 to 10 minutes with an incapacitated first officer. Nobody flying the aircraft. Nobody talking to ATC.
You think he just fell asleep?
No.
There's no medical issue.
We've all thought it before.
Yeah, man. I always wonder, last night coming back from El Salvador, I was thinking, I'm like, we have millions of flights per year on red eyes. How has there never been people that both fallen asleep?
Oh, it's happened several times. Yeah. But
it doesn't make the news.
Oh, it does, but it gets suppressed pretty quick. But it's been covered in the news. I'll see if I can find some articles.
Have you seen the Northwest incident back in the Northwest? Yeah. I mean, whenever something gets that crazy, whenever you overfly your destination by 100 miles because you're You're both
On the
on your laptop.
computers.
That'll hit
Yep.
national news. Yeah.
Yeah, that was over like Minneapolis or something. They just kept
Yeah.
going. Yeah.
But here Airbus again. Airbus and Boeing are huge competitors. It's all about the dollar. If they can sell and save the airline money for having one pilot up there, they're doing it, and they're the first one to the punch. So stay tuned. I'm interested to see how that's going to go. Nothing will happen fast,
No,
but it is in development.
I was just having this conversation on a commute with a guy a couple days back. I think it is possible in our lifetimes, we're all young enough that we might end up seeing some form of single pilot ops. I don't think we'll.
100%.
Yeah, I don't think we'll see zero pilot ops. I don't think at the current way life's going, I don't think the general public's going to trust for that. But that could change too. I mean, with self-driving automated cars coming, that's getting really popular. You go to I went to San Francisco a couple weeks ago and we had like a long 30-hour layover. Ubers were starting to go away. It's all Waymos out there. It's all these automated cars, and they're like really nice cars. I didn't get in one, but like I'm still I don't trust it yet, but they're all nice cars. They're like Cadillacs and stuff too. And the guy
They
that
were in
drove
Phoenix for 5 years.
yeah,
So I've
the
seen
guy,
them around, yeah.
the guy that pulls up in my Ubers in a janky old Corolla that's literally falling apart, or I can get in this Cadillac that's super comfy. Well, it's probably the same price too. I don't know, man. It's possible it's going to happen.
I think so. Did you see the stuff that came out maybe a month or two ago from Airbus on the new generation of A320s they're going to come out with in about a decade?
Is that what the open fan concept?
Yeah, but the technology they want to go through is AI, and I guarantee you, this is the last generation of A320s that are going to be dual pilot. The ones they start coming out with in 2035 and 2040.
Yes, this is what sparked the big ALPA, the big ALPA articles against the single pilot ops, right? When they announced that new concept for the airplane.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I think this was like 2 or 3 months ago. Was. So I think genuinely these airplanes are going to have to be in service for a while to make money. Obviously, they're 40-year lifespan for like an Airbus or a 737. But these next generation of airplanes, there is no way in hell that they're going to make these two pilot. I just don't think so. That's my own opinion. That's 10, 15 years away from right now. Think about this. 15 years ago, what was it? 2010? Think about where the world was in 2010 versus now. And
Nice.
We're at the precipice of some really big fundamental changes in our economies and technologies. So that's my opinion. I don't know, other than Delta's contract, which they're going to get paid out insane money if they do have to switch that out of their contract. I think that's something that every airline should be fighting for right now, is if they want that. Because in my mind, I was talking about this with the captain. I was like, what are they going to do with 50% of the pilots? Are they just going to furlough them? Or is there going to be something from the government saying that you have to give them some kind of disability or something?
That's
if
been,
you're just going to...
Yeah. They've been talking
like,
about
what are
that
you going to do?
Podcast. Yeah.
Because we actually have money to govern, or we have money to go throw at lobbyists to go do something about that, hopefully. So I don't know. That's my point of view, but...
And there is probably some people listening now saying, well, there's some citations and there's airplanes that are made to be flown single pilot. And
I was single pilot in the Phenom.
I was single pilot as well. And the big gotcha on that is all those aircraft are either under a Part 91 or a Part 135. We're talking about 121 airline, the flying public, single pilot operations. Whenever you take a 135 flight and you take a Part 91 flight, they're under a completely different list of regulations.
Yeah.
So I think that is important to note. Yeah, you can go out and you'll see guys flying a single pilot citation around, perfectly legal, but under 135 and 91, you're taking a certain risk that is out of the language of the Part 121 regulations.
Well, and it has to do with, like you're talking about, risk acceptability, right? So, Part 135 is the charter operations, and Part 91 is private jet kind of and private operation stuff. But those aircraft, at most, the Gulfstream that you fly, Connor, is like up to 19 seats or something, right? Like those aircraft don't carry more than 15, 20 passengers at most. Most of the time, they're configured for 10-ish at most. So
right.
We're not talking about hundreds of people at risk. That's why
exactly.
That's why commercial airlines, these big airliners, they fall under a different certification because you're carrying hundreds of people, and you can't do single pilot in those aircraft. It's completely different. So
I thought it was important to bring up.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you did. John, you got anything else to add on that before we move on?
No, I just like think about going into Reno or somewhere like there, like the bounce landing or the single engine takeoff stuff. Imagine in those 320s or 73s doing a single pilot off that. Dude, I'm not doing
Bro,
that job if they're not. I'm not I'm because the odds of you making one mistake and something happening are way higher, and it's all about risk mitigation. So, I think what happens if they ever try to go to no pilots or the single pilots have issues in terms of once a couple crashes happen, the insurance companies aren't going to insure it
mm-hmm,
anymore. And that's the
mm-hmm.
end of the game there.
Yep.
So they're taking an immense risk in developing a program if it's only for single pilot with no right seat. It'll be interesting. Maybe they have the capability of right seat as a fail safe in case it can't get certified. And at least they still have some kind of platform that they can sell to airlines for cost efficiencies and all that. But if they just go one seat, holy shit, dude! Like that's a huge gamble. It's hundreds of billions of dollars that Airbus is putting their money where their mouth is, and they're pretty damn sure it's going to work. So,
Yep. Do you guys ever watch the YouTube Lego Living the Dream videos?
living the dream.
Living the dream. So the guy, the channel name is like Ballrock 12. I'll put a link to it in there. But the last one he like did one of them, which was super popular, and then he didn't do a bunch, and then he knocked out 3 more. The last one at the end of it is like he wakes up from the dream that was the whole video, and
Yeah.
he's single pilot, and the little robo autopilot next to him is like waking him up, like, you don't have approved sleep time. If I can link it in here, I'll put it. Or if I can add it in after and post and not get in trouble with YouTube, I'll do it. Or maybe
And
I'll
they're
reach
going to
out
have
to
to have a
him.
certain regulation like that, because I think of like Tesla. Tesla's self-driving, but your hands have to be on the wheel in order for it to accelerate,
Well,
stop, and
right
go.
now, that's how FSD is. But as it because they're using, it's crazy. Tesla's so smart. They're using their customers as their beta testers, and once they can prove to the DOT that, hey, we've got hundreds of thousands or millions of hours now of this working, then they can get their approval and sign off for full self-driving. Right? It's crazy. It's coming. It's coming.
Weird times,
Yep.
2025.
And that statement right there, this example at the end here is exactly why at the beginning I said, like, with the current way things are, I don't think passengers are ready for it. But, in 10 years, once all cars are automated and everyone's cool with that, they might start getting comfortable with automated cockpits. We'll see. Let's move on to the big topic of the day. What's going on with the air traffic control system in the U.S.? We've got a lot to cover on this. I am a former controller. I was a center controller, and so I'm going to kind of give
Whoa. Yeah, where are you over?
I was at Seattle Center.
Seattle Center. Okay.
Yeah, I have not. It's been almost, and John brought it up. It's been almost a decade since I've been out, but I still talk to all my controller buddies. I'm still trying to keep my finger on the pulse. I did a lot of research to brief this up so I can give you guys a pretty good overview, and all the pilots and general people listening an overview of what's going on. I will start off, and I'll reiterate this a couple times. I would love to have a controller or happily a NATCA representative come on that is willing and able to talk to us about this. So if anybody is listening that wants to get on here, please reach out to us. All our contact information is in the links. So what's going on? So there's been a lot of public issues going on ever since the midair at DC earlier this year. We now have some public, real big outages that have happened. Newark has been the big highlight airport recently. Denver Center just had a big failure this week. And so what's going on? Why is this happening? Well, we've got outages increasing. So Secretary Duffy, Sean Duffy, who's the DOT secretary in the U.S., on May 8th made an announcement that there are 618 aging radars. There's 4,600 sites that still relay on copper wiring. There's 2,000 radios approaching their end of life, and they all need to be replaced within the next 4 years.
Wow.
So to give a brief overview of this, I want to go into the history of what the FAA calls their NextGen system, which is their modernization of air traffic control. So back in 1982, the FAA announced the plan to update the National Airspace System, the NAS. It wasn't until 2003 when NextGen was actually conceived. In 2007, the program officially began. In 2010 was the first initial operation capability achieved at Salt Lake City for ERAM, which I'll go into a little bit, which was the en route modernization for air traffic for en route air traffic. So that wasn't until 2010 at Salt Lake. In 2012, the TRACONs got their initial deployment of STARS, which is their new system. I'll put pictures up in the editing process of what the old stuff and new stuff looks like. ADS-B deployment was finally completed in 2014. In 2015, CPDLC initial implementation in the en route airspace. In 2016, 56 airports had PDC available finally. So then in 2020, they finally mandated enforcement of ADS-B, which is kind of the backbone of this NextGen program, because the whole idea of the NextGen program was to transfer from ground-based navigational aids to satellite and modern stuff. This picture I'm pushing up right now actually is from the FAA. When I was in training to be a controller at the academy, they put this picture up for us. So you have the old Connie on the left side that's relying on all the ground base, and then we transition in the middle there to kind of where we're at now, which is half ground based, half satellite based, and in the future they're trying to get where it's almost entirely satellite based, right? Not relying on outdated ground systems. So that's the whole point of what they're trying to do with this NextGen program, right? The original target for completion was 2025, which we're at today, of course. The government being who they are, they've now pushed it out to 2030. So simply stated, the NextGen's a modernization initiative that's moving the U.S. aviation away from radar-based systems with radio comms on the ground to all satellite-based systems with GPS. It, in theory, will allow the system to handle 3 times the volume, but the traffic is continuing to grow. All this hardware is old and outdated and failing now, and all the updates and the schedule hasn't kept up with demand. So just going back over that quick overview I gave you there, in 1982, they initiated the plan they released to update the NAS. Well, it wasn't until 2003 until they conceived the NextGen concept. So that's 20 years. And then here we are an additional 20 years later, and it still hasn't been fully implemented. Sean Duffy said we have 4 years to update everything, right? This is just to kind of hopefully give everybody a oh my gosh moment of what's happening here, right? We've got a lot to overcome to be able to get this system moving. So what happened, right? So 2 big public things have happened, not including the midair collision. So we've had Newark falling apart. On April 27th, they had an audio issue that disrupted air traffic communications between controllers at the Philadelphia TRACON, which is a terminal radar approach control center for lay people, which is just kind of an intermediate between the towers and the en route centers. So Area C of that facility, they lost all their radio communications, which is why they weren't able to communicate.
What does that mean, Scott? What does that mean?
What that means is they were able to still see the aircraft, but the controllers and the pilots couldn't talk to each other. In a tight place like Newark is very difficult because it's underneath all the big New York. You've got LaGuardia, JFK around them, and Newark has to get slid in underneath them for the arrival and departure zones, right? It's real tight airspace. So you're working with you need to be able to talk to these guys right now. Because if you don't, that guy's going to fly into somebody else's airspace, which could cause all kinds of conflicts, right? So for 90 seconds, they couldn't talk to each other, which is like an eternity in our world. And in the controller world, it's like a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't even imagine sitting there and not being able to talk to somebody. It would be one of the most terrifying things as a controller. So that happened on April 27th. That was the first big thing. Then on May 5th and May 9th, controllers lost all radio communications with aircraft for an additional 60 to 90 seconds. And this was, I believe, Newark specific. On Monday, May 12th at about 1:50 p.m., Denver Air Route Traffic Control Center, which is Denver Center, which is in Longmont, Colorado, experienced a radio communications failure lasting 90 seconds. Just comparison, Denver Center's airspace covers 285,000 square miles.
Huge.
And they lost everything for 90. They could still see everybody, but they couldn't talk to anybody for 90 seconds. The radar still functioned.
And that's affecting multiple states, as you just mentioned.
Yeah, so that's like Montana, Denver, parts of New Mexico, half of Utah, Wyoming, into Kansas, and Nebraska, and the Dakotas. That's like all their airspace. Okay, so that's
Scott,
like, go ahead.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
What exactly is failing? Do you know, like, is it the copper wire? Like, what exactly is causing the issue?
So I tried to look it up, and obviously I don't know if they've released that or not.
Yeah.
We can go as deep as you guys want into it. I have enough material to go really deep, but
Dude,
I don't want to get
like,
too technical,
yeah,
like, because
whatever you want to do.
it could take an hour. Yeah,
I do too.
yeah, there you go, Connor. A good man. I'll try to keep it not too technical, but basically to answer it, it has to do with a lot of the hardware. So the difference between us and Nav Canada per se is our systems are entirely hardware based. It was all about making the best hardware, the best computer systems, this, that, and the other thing. Whereas Nav Canada was like, no. We're going to go software based because that's the future. So our systems are a lot older than everybody else's. So for example, this is a picture of what some of the FAA towers still look like. This might be an older picture,
Wow.
but essentially you've got all your old boards. I know for a fact that a couple towers still look like this because I've been in them. So, these are all old
The
systems, right?
70s.
We are literally, the FAA towers are still using these paper strips you see down here in the corner. They print out these strips and they write on them, like with pens.
To sequence aircraft?
To know who they're talking to sequence aircraft, right? Up here, this is probably a slave display of what the Tracon radar looks like, which is really helpful to a lot of these guys. It kind of gives them a visual, because they're supposed to still be looking out the window with their binoculars and talking to airplanes and have a mental picture of what's going on. But this is what some of the towers still look like in the United States. Okay. For comparison, let me show you a picture of what a Nav Canada tower looks like. So this is a Nav Canada tower. Nav Canada towers.
Wow.
Yeah, everything's touchscreen. Everything is completely software based. It's all beautifully laid out, way more efficient. Now, obviously, I'm giving you two extreme examples, but this picture was taken 15 years ago. So, I mean, their systems are probably even more modern. A good example to all this is when I was at Seattle Center, we were on ERAM. It's the newer version of the en route sectors here in the country of the center. This is what an ERAM sector looks like. Okay. So you've got your main radar controller screen here, and then you have your data controller. So you're usually working, well, now with the shortages, it's one guy working both monitors a lot. But if it's really busy, you can request what's called a data controller, or a D-side, which is an assistant controller who deals with all the flight data on the right. And these are their two screens they work with. You have this pull-down monitor here called eRIDS. I can't remember off the top of my head what it stands for, but it's a touch screen with all your charts and maps and everything. It's a like super informational iPad for controllers. But this is what our systems look like, okay? This was developed in the early 2000s. Lockheed Martin was given the contract for that. In comparison, I can show you what it might not be as readily obvious to people, but like this is what a Nav Canada sector looks like, right? And so it's a lot more clean and efficiently put together. Their systems are just way more advanced. And for example, at the time when I was a controller, our Seattle Center computers could not talk directly to Nav Canada because they were so far ahead of ours. Our computers were so old, they just couldn't communicate. So basically, when an aircraft was crossing the international boundary, we would have our own data tags for that aircraft on our systems. Then Canada would have to generate their own as like a separate aircraft. And then we would have to do something called a manual handoff, which was essentially a phone call saying like, hey guys, you see this airplane right here at the border? Yeah, he's about to cross the border. We're giving you guys control. And then they would have to manually tell their computers, okay, we're in control of this airplane now. It's ours. Whereas, if our computers could talk to each other, the computers would just automatically do that. You click a button, off it goes. You wouldn't have to make these phone calls. It would cut down tons of controller workload. But you imagine how many aircraft are crossing the international boundary a day, right? That's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of phone calls between these guys. So we are grossly outdated in our systems because the government always takes so long to do everything. And we are so far behind everybody that instead of looking forward, we've tried to focus on keeping the equipment we have alive. Well, that equipment is now, anywhere between 20 and 40 years old, depending on what you're talking about and working with.
The FAA has confirmed that it is purchasing parts for aging ATC systems on eBay and 3D printing these parts because they're not there.
Because they don't make them.
Nuts.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous, and it's a failure beyond failures.
So
the FAA is ordering parts off of eBay.
Yep. For example, STARS, which is the TRACON system they're using now.
Could you imagine if Delta Airlines started ordering parts off of eBay?
Right. Dude, it's crazy, right? So this is the STARS terminal that the TRACON guys are using now. It's definitely an upgrade. So STARS was conceived about 25, 30 years ago. They just finished the implementation, I believe, a few years back for all the facilities. Up until that point, everybody was on something called ARTS, and this is what ARTS was. This, like, I'm not kidding. Like, it had the radar sweep, the boop, boop, boop. That was, for example, I had a buddy who was at a tower in Central Texas when I was getting a type rating in Dallas, and I drove down to visit him, and they were this was like 5 years ago, and they were transitioning from this to STARS. They were one of the last facilities. Like, they were still working on this. Like, this is the FAA, right? Like, this is, like, everybody's always wondering why there's so many problems, because they're working on such outdated stuff because our bureaucracy is so damn bloated, and they haven't been forward-looking, and it's creating all kinds of problems. So, long answer. So, for example, like, quick info. STARS was initiated in the late 1990s. Raytheon got the contract to develop it in 96. The first implementation was in 2002 at Philadelphia TRACON. They didn't finish deployment until late 2017. So it
11
was,
years?
No. That's 15 years.
15, okay, sorry.
15 years for full deployment. It took, I believe they got ERAM deployed in about 12 years. STARS was 15. 13 years to roll out ERAM to 20 facilities. And then ADSB had to get brought in. Datacom, which was CPDLC, PDC, all these things. They've been working on that since the early 2000s. We didn't implement it domestically until 2016. Indianapolis Center was the first one to do it. Most other foreign countries, especially the Europeans, have implemented it domestically since the early 2000s. So we're just decades behind everybody because we want to do our own thing and we don't want to learn from the others. At least that's from the outside. That's what it's seeming like. What does it all mean, right? It took 25 years to roll out NextGen, give or take, and we still haven't fully finished it. There's still stuff they need to do. Duffy said we have to have this all updated in 4 years. Nav Canada has been running paperless towers since 1998. We still print strips and write on them with pencils and pens.
That's incredible.
We can't, our systems can't communicate with other systems because we're so outdated. That is kind of an overview of what's wrong with the system. Now, how does this tie into what's been happening, right? You've got the failures at Denver and Newark, which unfortunately are symptoms of this bigger problem, which means we're going to see more of it. For example, it was in 2022, I was flying a Phenom under 135, and we were going from Salt Lake to Denver to pick up some passengers. And there was a 90-second failure at that time. I was in the air on a star that they hadn't given us the descend via clearance yet. So we're just putzing along in the clouds over the mountains in Colorado, waiting for our descend via. And luckily we monitor guard. This is why we monitor guard partially. All of a sudden, I'm like, well, they haven't descended us yet. And the guy was flying was like, yeah. And so we start querying, nothing happened. So I got on guard and I was like, hey, do you guys hear us? And they're like, oh, transfer to Denver approach on this frequency. We're over like the western mountains of Colorado, and now we have to talk to Denver approach because Denver Center couldn't talk to us. So they had Denver Center, it was a disaster, total disaster, right? And so this was like, these symptoms have been happening for years. They've just been not publicly big, but now that, we've We had that midair. The media is all over it. So how does this tie into the controller side of it, right? The big thing is the news is reporting like half the controllers walk out of the tower, right? Well, I'll give you a brief overview on that. Staffing shortages. So FAA is approximately 3,000 controllers short of the required staffing levels. The gap has been persistent for about a decade. As of 2023, 77% of the critical ATC facilities were understaffed, and that problem was exacerbated because they had a 2-year hiring pause during COVID. You have a high turnover under age cap. Most people don't realize there's a hiring cap. You cannot get hired after your 32nd birthday. I was hired, I think, 2 weeks before my 32nd birthday. I didn't think I was going to make it because they were just delaying and delaying. It took me over 2 years. I want everyone to understand that. From when I applied to when I started at the FAA Academy, it was a 2-year process.
Wow.
2 years. It was crazy.
Why is that? Is that
because
just because they're
bureaucracy? It was all bureaucracy because you have to go through I'll save it for if we hopefully get a controller on to do the hiring process, but there's a series of steps you have to go through to get hired. And so it was you'd do this one step and then you'd have to wait 4 months for them to process the paperwork of what you just did. Then you can move on to step 2. And then you have to wait 4 to 6 months for whoever's in charge of that to process that paperwork. And it was just so it's this hurry up and wait. Because when you get to the next step, they're you have to get it done now. And then you have to wait for 4 months. It was crazy. Anyways, digressing on that. So the problem is you have until your 32nd birthday, and then mandatory retirement's your 56th birthday. So you got to hire young people, and then they age out, right? So those are all contributing to the staffing issues, right? They're 3,000 short. They've been short for over a decade. When I was there in the 20-teens, we were short-staffed. They were always begging for overtime. Well, shortly after I left is when mandatory overtime went into effect. So controllers at many facilities are working mandatory overtime, 10-hour shifts, 6 days a week. Mandatory 6 days have been in effect since 2018, which was right after I left. So your mandatory overtime. Sure, these guys are making overtime, but they're working 6 days a week mandatorily. And the only way to get out of it
sucks.
The only way to get out of it is to call in sick, right? Which then you can get in trouble for banging out your sick days, right?
Do these guys have a union or something?
Yeah, they have NATCA.
Protect some of these work
National
rules?
Air Traffic Controllers Association, NATCA.
Okay.
So I want to get a NATCA rep on here again. I'm going to solicit it again. Hey, NATCA reps, I hope you're listening. Somebody who's allowed to speak freely, come on in. I'll give you all the time you want, whatever you need. I'll make it work. So this has led to widespread fatigue, right? And stress issues amongst the controllers. Because, if you had to work 6 days a week, if you're a government employee, you don't have a lot of the freedoms that we do as airline and corporate guys. You're screwed, right? Because you're a government employee. So stress, fatigue, right? Well, the big issue, Newark, had that severe impact, right? They had the failures. So now you have 20% of the controllers are on trauma leave right now because of what they experienced, right? Which is totally understandable. The amount of responsibility an air traffic controller takes on, think about it. If you make a mistake and 2 airplanes connect, you just killed a bunch of people. That's a lot to live with, right? And so you got now you have 20% of their controllers out on trauma leave. They were already understaffed on top of that to start this out. Extra pay and overtime doesn't mitigate the attrition, right? These grueling schedules are just driving people out of the profession. You can scream at the top of your lungs to your management team, but there's nothing they can do about it because they're government bureaucrats. And they're hey, you're just a cog in the wheel, right? So duration of the issue, NATCA, the union has been raising alarms about the staffing issues since at least 2010. So 15 years ago, they started complaining about this. They're hey guys, it's a problem. It's a problem. Mandatory overtime, 2018 onward, I already mentioned, and it's been consistently documented since 2023, mandatory overtime. So you got fatigue calls going up. You've got safety risks because of the fatigue. You've had over 500 near misses by commercial airlines in 2023 alone, related and linked to controller workload. That's just related to those, which in 2024, in April of last year, FAA, I remember they came out with this huge press thing. We are going to implement new rest rules for controllers, guaranteeing more time off between shifts, more rest. So that was April, May, so 13 months ago. It has not been implemented. It's been indefinitely delayed by the FAA because they're so understaffed they can't do it.
But I'm not
This
gonna
is
lie.
this is what's
Why would
happening.
you do this?
This is what's
Yeah.
happening. We're hemorrhaging qualified controllers, and you see, Sean Duffy get out there begging these people to come back. We want you back. We'll give you more money, whatever. Why would they come back to all this? I wouldn't. I could go back tomorrow. But I don't. I'm like, man, no, I got my cush airline job. I love it. This is why I came. Part of the reason I came over here was quality of life, right? And so you've got, now we've had ATC 0 situations because of this, which is you don't have the staffing to run the facility. So it just goes silent. Like we were at an airport in California. That was a couple months ago now. And it was later at night and they didn't have the staff because somebody called in sick. They couldn't run the tower for 8 hours that night. So this tower, which you're used to having 24-hour controllers in, went ATC 0, shut down. So now you're running out of a big airport in California. You're calling the Tracon on the radio to get your release, like old school, like IFR CTAF. And it's a CTAF. You're running it as a CTAF. It was crazy. It was like, and what was crazy was when we landed, they were open and running. And then the time it took us to like unload, load, and turn, they had shut the tower down without telling us. So, but that's what's happening across the country right now. This is an explanation as to why we're seeing what we're seeing, why the problems we're having. And unfortunately, it's just going to get worse because the systems are so outdated. We're running on copper wiring, not even fiber for most of this, which is still ridiculous because it should all be satellite based by now. Because I'm willing to bet most other places are like that. So I don't know. What do you guys got on that?
I think, obviously 90-second outages, I mean, that's kind of crazy, right? And, safety is everybody's priority. The first thing you think about is whenever you read something like that is, oh my goodness, what were the pilots thinking? What were they doing? Were they just talking to each other on frequency? You think about all the people they're flying. So safety is, that's issue number one. My mind goes to issue number two. Think about all the ground stops that this resulted in. So whenever you think of a ground stop, everything at the airport stops. You can't push, you can't taxi, you can't take off. Think about how much money that costed these airlines for a 30-second outage. I'm willing to bet millions of dollars.
Easily.
So at some point, and there's guys that are way more educated on this that are having meetings about this right now, I guarantee it. But these airlines are going to start pushing this even more because this is starting to directly affect money, and money runs the world. So safety number one, I mean, crazy. But I mean, this is really going to start affecting whenever you have ground stops and things like this, the pocketbooks of these airlines.
Yep.
Question for you guys. Scott Kirby went on CBS or ABC, one of those news channels, and he said it is absolutely 100% safe to fly to Newark right now. And he said, yeah, we really respect the controllers and do all that. I personally think it's a little disingenuous, to be honest with you, when you have 90-second outages in the busiest airspace in the world, some of it, and saying it is 100% just as safe now as it was when it wasn't happening, because that's not true. And I think it's disingenuous for him to go out and say that to the general public and say, hey, keep buying our tickets, go to Newark, because it's not changed any safety. We still have, and he'll say dumb it down for the pilots in terms of, they have different technologies and all those things. That's not a fail-safe, man.
There was one ATC controller working Newark Airport for 3 hours.
This is what I'm saying. Like, Don't tell me, man, that this is a safe thing.
Yep.
And it's not any different when it's a lot. I'm not going to say it's a lie. I think it's disingenuous to the uninformed public to say those kind of comments, personally.
Yep. I'm going to try to play devil's advocate here. With the modern aircraft systems, traffic collision avoidance systems, or TCAS systems, there are backup things. See and avoid, obviously, is primary. We do have the safest ATC system in the world. Let me correct that. The safest airspace system, airspace in the world. We have the least amount,
hands down.
But in John's defense, you are I get it. You want to push your business model. Obviously, United's CEO is going to say that one of their biggest hubs is
obviously
keep on flying through, but you're not addressing the fact that that airport has had the most public and most failures, especially in the past, month or two here. It's a problem. It needs to get fixed. It's oversaturated. They need to cut the slots down, period, so that if there is inevitably is another failure, which there might be, that what little controllers they have left can handle it.
I think they have done that. I think they've reduced United by like 25% for the summer.
And that's probably why he's saying what he's saying, right? He's trying to keep the money coming in. I don't know.
Look, I understand his point of view. He has to reassure people, but I can't say in good conscience that when I go up there and when they vector me into that approach for whatever 22 right or whatever it is, when you have the Hudson right there and all the GA traffic and everything, if that goes dark and we have 4 different airplanes getting vectored in on that approach, you don't know what's going to happen. 99.9% of the time, nothing's going to happen. But look at the one in DC, right? It doesn't take much and I want to just make one other point. We think of airplane crashes as like these huge, big deals. But at the end of the day, it's just math, right? Think about how many billions of flights take off every year, right? And we only hear about, 2 big airplane crashes this year? 1, for the most part. When you have math involved in large, large numbers, the odds continually go up that something is going to happen from these issues. And I think people forget that is like, yeah, it might not happen today. It might not happen tomorrow. But if it continues to happen and nothing gets done from this, we will have people dead. Okay, so I asked Grok, I said, okay, well, if there's 10.58 million flights that take off and land every single year in the US, it's like, okay, let's correlate that to car crashes at a rate of, and so I'm going to read this because I think it's really eye-opening for people. The odds of a car crash per 10.585 million driving trips are effectively certain, with a probability of at least one crash approaching 100%. On average, you'd expect around 309,166 crashes over this many trips, based on a crash rate of 1 in 366 per 1,000 miles driven, and an average trip of 10.7 miles. That's insane. So I think it correlates that. Imagine if 309,000 of these airplanes crashed. So that's my point of view.
Here, I've had this discussion so many times, especially more so lately, but it's like, you have to understand the risk we're playing with here. We've normalized commercial airline travel since deregulation in the late 70s, but it's like every day, hundreds, if not thousands of times a day, we're strapping 200 people into a metal tube that weighs 200,000 pounds and shooting it through the sky, at 500 to 700 miles an hour.
It's a risk.
It's crazy. Like, just think about that. Imagine 40, 50 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, but imagine 50 years ago telling somebody that, like, I'm going to strap you into a metal tube with 200 other people and shoot you through the sky near the speed of sound. Like, it would blow their minds. They'd be like, that's crazy, right? But we've normalized doing that while we're all sitting there on our phones, drinking and eating, and complaining that we don't have Starlink Wi-Fi and the internet's too slow. Like, that's where we're at.
29,000 flights per day, or 10.5 million times every single year a flight takes off commercially 121 and lands.
Yep.
That's insane.
Yep. I'm trying to get the statistics of fatal stuff. All the quick breakdowns are showing me like 2022. It's a little old. Even if we were just to use those for sake of argument, fatal accident rate for major airlines was 0 people per 100,000 flight hours in 2022, and for general aviation was 0.94 for 100,000 flight hours. That's what we're looking at. Like, imagine that.
Yeah. So
this is why it's so much safer to fly than it is to drive, right? Statistically speaking, the fatality rate is almost non-existent, statistically speaking.
And if you think about it, all of our procedures, all of our checklist, everything that we do today, tomorrow, and the next day in aviation is all written in blood. So
the regs are written in blood. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Everything is written in blood. So, I mean, right now, it is the safest it's ever been to fly aircraft. Because, I mean, whenever I was going through my training just about a month and a half ago, there was an incident that happened on a Gulfstream. It was a nose wheel steering hard over. And that was required to be in our training. And it's only been in there for about a year or two now. But every time something happens, whether it's something mechanical with the aircraft, every time something happens that's not pilot error, then they implement that in training for either an initial or a recurrent, so it doesn't happen again if it's a known issue. That was my finishing thought.
It's always so reactive and not proactive.
Right.
And, you know, it's tough, right? Because it's a double edged, because it's a good thing that we're learning from our mistakes, right? And we are trying to prevent it from happening again. We wish we could see it before it happens. But like this all goes back to, you know, it's a risky thing, right? We're shooting these giant tubes of metal through the sky at hundreds of miles per hour. You know, it's kind of hard to foresee everything that can happen. We would like to, but the world's not a safe place, man. Like, as much as we want it to be, you can't helicopter parent everything. So
yeah,
there has to be some level of risk acceptability to be able to operate these kinds of these machines, right?
100%.
I think the thing that has been missing most in all this is the right public speaker to explain this to the general public, then get them on board.
Why don't they just make a YouTube video and just say these things?
Well,
I'm not even kidding you, man.
I know. I'm laughing because it's funny, because it's true. The problem is finding the right speaker to do it, right? I mean, up to this point, we've just had these dumb bureaucrats who don't even know. Like, have you guys seen the video of the last administration trying to get their FAA administrators through the Congress? They didn't
know anything.
They didn't know anything. It's ridiculous. That's who we were working with. Duffy is the first guy we've had who's actually done the research, it seems like, to try to sound like he knows what he's talking about. And he's doing his best job he can, I think, considering. He's at least put the effort in, so you got to give him that respect. We need more people like that to get these points across to the general public. It's just been non-existent.
Totally.
I want to give some explanation to something Connor said, which was we were talking about the regs being written in blood. That's a statement that's used a lot in our industry that might sound weird to just a layperson, but basically what it means is new regulations are created from somebody dying. The FAA and the government has not been proactive, especially historically, in creating better safety regulations before something bad happens. And because of that, after somebody dies, we write a new regulation to prevent it from happening again, which is why we use that term, the regs are written in blood, or written in red, but they mean blood. So that I want to explain that to people, just so everybody kind of understands and they don't think we're being dramatic or ridiculous in any way. So
it's 100% the truth.
Yeah, it is. It's really sad, but that's the system, you know, and it sucks because it's been like that so long. Everyone's just been like, oh, that's what we have to deal with. That's what we live with. But it shouldn't be. It doesn't have to be that way. You know, I'm only speculating what it's like from other countries, but I wonder if Canada's system is like that. I mean, their system is so much more advanced than ours, especially technologically speaking. I don't know what their regulations are like. I should probably look into it. But I'm curious to see if they are similar.
I wonder what the accident rate is up there compared to in America.
Yeah.
Because I haven't heard of any 121 crashes up there in a very long time, too. So I'm just not well versed in the brothers up north, I guess you could say, across the border. So I'm not too sure. It was interesting flying through Havana and Havana Center and all those different types of places. And like we do have the cream of the crop when it comes to talent in America. That is for sure.
Got it out.
Quick question for you guys. So with what happened in Denver and Newark twice now, is it that all of the technology that was implemented back then is finally like starting to fail at the same time? Like, is that going to be an exponential issue that as we approach this lifespan of what that technology is capable of, is it going to just start failing dramatically across the nation? And Newark is just the first sign of that, and Denver, TRACON as well.
Well, before we answer that, have either of you guys experienced something like what I'm talking about, where you've had a loss of communications with controllers?
Yeah, but it's based on weather, and I just switched off to VHF2
Okay.
and do the best. And in that case, I think if like we were going between two big thunderstorms, that the one that killed about like 23 people a couple days ago, and we lost complete communication with them. There's another aircraft coming, and we got a TCAS and converging on each other. And it's like we have a 20-mile spread between two massive pink cells. And it's like at that point, we're going to deviate just a little bit to the right because we don't have any communication. I mean, we're IMC, but you got to aviate first, right? So in that sense, you got to be a pilot. Obviously, it's different in your case, Scott, where you're just on top and you miss a descend via. Obviously, you're probably not going to start that descend via without someone telling you to. But when it comes to, in our case, I think there's more discretion involved in making a change if we know that something's going to happen.
Yeah, and to clarify, that storm killed people on the ground, not airplane.
Yeah,
Okay.
Sorry, I thought that was obvious.
You're good. I just wanted to make sure.
I think it's smart, just like you said, kind of in that same vein. It's, in the event that an outage occurs and you're up there flying, it's always aviate, navigate, communicate. And, talking to ATC is third on the list. So at some point, we just got to be natural aviators. And if you see something that needs to be done, you got to do it. And then, because you're going to deviate from a clearance for safety only, right?
Well, remember, you have to revert to Avenue S MEA, which you learned in instrument.
Right.
Like that literally applies. We had that discussion when we lost comms with Denver Center, and we're like, well, can we descend via? I have to think back. Did we file it? Were we cleared? How did it? Because that determines whether you descend or not. It's really crazy. Like when something like this happens, you revert back to your primary training, and it still applies. For all those some newer pilots and training pilots, people in training listening to this, everything you're learning right now, we've been doing this for a while, all of us. We still revert back to some of that primary stuff every day. So it's not wasted. It's not irrelevant. It does matter. You will use it through your whole career. Have either of you dealt with ATC 0 events recently?
Yeah. Well, I have in the past, but it was because of my aircraft. I was right over the top of DFW on the descent into McKinney, which is about 30 miles away. Mm-hmm. I had a full electrical failure.
Oh, wow.
And so I was dark, but it wasn't because of ATC. It was because of my aircraft.
Okay.
And I was at 3,000 feet, and I was able to call the tower on my cell phone and talk to them on my cell phone.
I've done that too.
So that's, whenever you ask, that's like what comes to my mind. And manual gear extension because it was an electric gear and all that. So
check you out.
But no, I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but that's like the one that like pops into my mind. I'm sure I've had it, but nothing else.
Well, and that's the big thing. Like you've probably experienced something, because this happened occasionally. So all the centers and TRACONs and stuff, they have something called a backup emergency frequency. They call it a Buick, and they have to test them daily. So you'll be flying along sometimes, especially at night, and you'll hear them like, "Hey, can I test some frequencies out with you guys?" Or you'll hear it on frequency, and what they're doing is they're testing your backups, because in the event of a failure, they do have to switch to their backup, which does happen a lot more than people realize, but you never notice it because they just switch over on their end, and you don't see it. And then they call their tech ops guys who go in and fix whatever the problem is, and then they go back to the primary frequency. But it's been happening a lot, and I wish I could get the stats on it. I'm sure those are kept under wraps somewhere for obvious reasons, but I'm willing to bet it's happening a lot more than people are aware of. That the system is starting to really, it's outdated. It's outdated. It's overwhelmed, and it's another problem with just being reactive. Now that everything's starting to fall apart, they want to fix it right now. Well, at the speed of current government, I mean, it's getting better under what's going on now with the newer administration, but historically, the speed of government, it's impossible at what they're trying to accomplish. So we'll see if they're able to fix it. I really hope they are. But yeah, guys. Well, we covered a lot of ground today.
That was a good episode.
Yeah.
Yes, man. That's my favorite. I look forward to it every week.
It's so much fun. That was, so hopefully we were able to answer some give some insight to some people and maybe answer some questions people have had with what's going on with the FAA and the ATC outages and stuff. I'll put some more links and pictures up, more visualization. Thanks for coming on again, Connor. It's great to have you. Try to
I'm
make
all in
you,
our dude.
yeah, make you a regular.
Y'all hit me up whenever y'all got something going on, and I'm sure send Scott and John some topics that y'all are interested in. I'm sure they'd love to go over them.
Definitely.
That way, don't bitch about Spirit too much. Don't get me going, man. I said that way, don't bitch about Spirit too much. I'll go on every single time. No, I'm kidding.
Well, it's good. Hey, at least you got the stats when you do it, man. I love listening to you talk because you know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, nobody can argue with stats. Stats are stats, man.
Yeah.
Yep. It's anybody that's listening that wants to talk about something, even if you want to, whether you want to come on or not, we'd love to have new guests on. But if you have something you want to hear us talk about, shoot us an email. You can message us at our email address, which is autopilotonpodcast@gmail.com. You can message us through the website, which is autopiloton.com. We have an X account, which we're going to start getting more active.
Everything app.
Yep. We're going to Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. We do have an Instagram. We're going to start.
We'll be starting to post those lately.
Yep.
I'll get those started for everyone, and so that way we have a base, and that way you guys can see clips that we're producing, all that, and DM us. We'd love to hear what you guys have to say, and we'll continue to grow our base of professional and enthusiast aviators.
Thanks again, everybody, and we'll catch you on the next one.
See ya.
See ya.